Welcome to the Athletic FC podcast with me, Ayo Akinwolere. Arsenal are 6 points clear at the top of the Premier League, and Eberechi Eze has been playing a starring role so far. So how important has their summer business been? In with us today, we have our Arsenal correspondent, James McNicholas, who was at the Emirates. We've also got Adam Crafton as well, our Monday regular. Right, James, come on. What a day at the Emirates for Arsenal, beating Spurs 4-1 in a North London derby. Wow, Arsenal fans must be jubilant.
I think so, yeah, going 6 points clear at the top of the Premier League table. Eberechi Eze scoring a hat-trick in his first North London derby, having declined to join Spurs in the summer. It's kind of storybook stuff, really, for Arsenal fans, and they thoroughly enjoyed themselves at the Emirates Stadium on Sunday. So, yeah, fantastic weekend for them as well, with City dropping points at Newcastle. So things are looking very good for the Gunners right now.
Yeah, what did you think of the match, Adam? What did you think of Spurs? The golfing class showed in many respects?
Yeah, right. I just said this before the podcast, but it does feel like the only people that don't really fully recognise maybe yet how good Arsenal are might be Arsenal fans, because of like the experience of the last few years where there is this kind of, I think, predisposition, is that a word? Supposition that things might go wrong at some stage. But actually, you know, from a more objective standpoint, I think the coach has been building to this for a very long time. The squad is incredibly strong. I think, and this isn't to take anything away from Arsenal, I do think the field this year is probably as generous as it's been for quite a while. And I do think there is the potential there for Arsenal to really pull away because of the lack of consistency other teams are showing. And then, you know, never in previous seasons would, you know, Odegaard not be playing and then someone like Eze could come in and Gabriel not be playing. And I'm sure there will be games where Arsenal are challenged more or the game's tighter and they miss him at the other end of the pitch. But I didn't really notice yesterday. And that's partly because of Tottenham, but I do think Arsenal are probably, maybe along with Bayern Munich, the best team in Europe at the moment, certainly at the start of the season. So what they're doing doesn't really surprise me. They don't really concede goals. They find ways to score goals. They have goals from different positions, and it's really strong. So we should probably end the podcast there because that's most of the season sorted.
That'd be James happy, to say the least. I mean, James, much has been made about Arsenal set pieces, right? And every time I feel like I watch Arsenal, the commentary is about how their set pieces are so effective. They didn't have Gabriel yesterday, who was injured, who has been effective on those set pieces. Great to see that the goals have been spread out, including a hat-trick from Eberechi Eze.
Listen, that's exactly what Eze was brought in to do, really, to give them a kind of varied threat in the final third. And it was really interesting hearing Mikel Arteta talk last night about how much of an asset is that he's just prepared to take shots on that maybe other players wouldn't. And I think if you look at two of Arsenal's, most productive attackers, it's Trossard and Eze, and they both have a willingness to shoot off either foot in a variety of situations. The ball doesn't have to sit perfectly for them. They can take it first time. They can take it when it's under their feet. They've got short back lift. And I think that's really brought a different degree of threat to Arsenal's front line. The set pieces thing, look, there is a value in it. Certainly there'll be games where Arsenal are sort of faced with a deep block and struggling to break them down, where maybe they do miss Gabriel as that difference maker. I think Arsenal are brilliant at set pieces. I think Gabriel is absolutely the key to that. I mean, the delivery from Declan Rice and Gabriel's capacity to get on the end of stuff is second to none, really, in the Premier League. But Arsenal have got so many options at their disposal now. They've got a very varied threat. As Adam mentioned, Odegaard absent, no Gyökeres yesterday, no Havertz, Martinelli and Madueke fit enough for the bench, Gabriel Jesus still recovering from an ACL, and yet, they still had more than enough to see off Spurs. And I think, actually, when you look at the players Arsenal are getting back, particularly in attacking areas, you can make the case that they ought to get better going forward and in open play as these attacking players get used to combining, playing together. We haven't really seen Eze and Odegaard in the same team, for example. When Arsenal have that at their disposal, if they get the balance right, that they could still improve.
Yeah, we'll talk about those options a little later on. I guess we have to talk about Spurs right now, Adam. Look, this was a team coming into this, I think, with I think, the best away form in the Premier League at the moment, if not one of the best away forms. But yesterday, Spurs only managed 4 touches in Arsenal's penalty area, 2 shots on target, finished the game with an XG of 0.07. Spurs made 72 passes in Arsenal's half. Arsenal made 186 passes in Spurs' half. What would you put that down to, that the lack of desire yesterday? Because it was still a North London derby.
Played against a much better team. I think
Mm,
that's the first thing.
yeah.
It's good to see Tottenham finally take their their home form on the road, because that's basically what they've been doing at home for the last few weeks as well. Um, I think there are. I think Tottenham fans are very frustrated. That's the first thing. So it's never nice, obviously, to get battered, and it could have been like 5, 6, 7. Um, towards the end of that game, Eze had more chances to score more goals. What I would say about Spurs is, first of all, I do think like what they were last season was such a mess. And I know there's some Tottenham fans are very divided on this. Some Tottenham fans think Ange should have been given more time, that the trophy kind of forgave everything, that the Premier League form wasn't real because they prioritised the Europa League. I just don't buy it. Like, because if you go way back to kind of October, November even, it was really poor last season. The injuries, to key creative players, Kulusevski, Maddison, when we talk about why aren't Tottenham expressing themselves, well, I think that is a part of it. If you're missing 2 of your best creative players, I think they are also in this transition period coming out of having probably 2 of their best attacking players of all time in Kane and Son, that they've replaced so far pretty poorly. They have spent money, but not spent money that well. And I think, although rival fans will often look at, Tottenham have spent, 150 million, 200 million, whatever it is. One of Tottenham's biggest differences still is what they spend on wages. If you compare what Tottenham spend on wages to what Arsenal spend on wages, it's probably 100 million or so behind. And that is to me, that is a far bigger, in like the kind of inflated transfer market of transfer fees, that's a far bigger kind of signpost of success and failure than transfer spend. What you spend on wages really defines the level of player, the category of player that you're signing. Some of the signings just haven't been as good as people thought they would be, Kudus and Xavi Simons. And then I think like Frank has to take, the XG that they've been recording in like games like this and Chelsea. I thought they were lucky against Man United to get the point that they got. United weren't great in that game either, but they're not offering enough. And I suppose the question is Frank just like going through this period where he's really trying to sort out the defence, to build a foundation in order to then build more going forwards? Or is this just who he is? And I think he needs to try and demonstrate in the next couple of, probably weeks, that there is more to him.
Well, I do think about it, James, and, it's still a North London derby, and regardless often what the team's positions are in the leagues, the North London derbies end up being this kind of just madness anyway. Were you surprised about how poorly Spurs turned out?
I mean, I understood what they were trying to do. They went with the back 5, and I think actually in that first half hour or so, they did kind of spoil the game a bit, which I think is what they were playing for. It was very bitty, stop-start, broken up by a lot of fouls. Arsenal had an early chance through Declan Rice, but other than that, not a great deal in that first half hour. The problem is that it was kind of half a game plan for Spurs, it seemed to me. Like it was a plan to contain and stay in the game, but they didn't really offer any sort of threat on the break. And once they went behind, it felt like that entire strategic approach was kind of out the window. And it seemed to me that probably they thought, well, we're 1-0 down, we'll get to half time, we'll regroup, we can make a change. They did indeed make a change at half time. But by then they were 2 down. And it's sort of game over, really. I mean, if not game over then certainly game over within 2 minutes of the restart when Eze gets his second goal. So I think that one of the interesting things is, I think with Spurs, there's always this kind of cultural question around the way the team plays. And it's something that they have in common with Arsenal fans, I think, where they have aspirations to play a certain type of football. And I think if you're Thomas Frank, he comes in with a reputation for like very pragmatic football from his time at Brentford. And when Spurs fans see that and they're not getting the results that they want on top of it, I do think it sits a bit at odds with their ideas, however well-founded or not, about the kind of club they are.
I think you're right, but like Brentford weren't boring.
No, I agree.
You know, over the past few years, they were direct at times, but I mean, they weren't direct in a kind of like Stoke Wimbledon way. They were a team that pressed well. That had they had threats from set pieces, but they also had power and pace and skill, and their forwards scored goals. I mean, they scored an incredible amount of home goals over the last couple of years. And what's also strange is we're kind of in this era where everyone's a bit more pragmatic now. So it's kind of weird to see it go the other way for Spurs, where it's just not working for them at this moment in time. But I don't think like the kind of football Thomas Frank wants to play is so backwards. I just think they're not I might be wrong. This might be who he is, and it might turn out that way. But I just think their forward players are really quite poor at the moment relative to the other ones at the top of the league. And look, I've got myself into trouble in the past with combined Arsenal-Tottenham 11s, but who are we looking at here from the Tottenham squad that is like getting in the Arsenal team?
Van de Ven, maybe,
but not ahead of Gabriel and Saliba.
No.
So I do think it is a particularly like 7th place squad that Spurs have at the moment. Not the 7th, like kind of 5th to 7th. Kind of where they are in that mix. I don't think it's a squad that is like pushing the envelope really at all. But you see some performances, and now we're starting to see a bit more inconsistency. But like from teams like Bournemouth and Villa and Newcastle, etc., where it's more exciting. And I think Spurs, if they're going to be in that mix, they have to have more days like that where they show promise of what this could be, rather than just kind of what it is at the moment.
James, like any other manager, I mean, Mikel Arteta, those first couple of seasons, Arsenal's league position wasn't that great. And then obviously they've gone on to consistently be second. Isn't it just a matter of time to see what he can actually do, bring his players in? Let's see if Thomas Frank can actually graduate from the Brentford Thomas Frank.
Perhaps so. I mean, I think a lot of clubs look at Arteta and sort of envision maybe following that model. And certainly Arteta did build from the back. We saw him play with a back five plenty of times in that first year or so in the job. I do think it's a bit dangerous sometimes the way in which clubs think, I will just do what Arteta did. I think he is maybe kind of the exception that proves the rule in some respects. I think actually the way in which he was sort of seemingly on the cusp of potentially losing his job, certainly losing the goodwill of the fans, and has seen that through and turned it round is relatively unusual. But he was given time, he was given patience, and he was given vast amounts of money. Let's be clear about that. I mean, Arsenal and Spurs both have big injury lists at this point in time. But I think what we saw yesterday is an Arsenal squad that has been built to be kind of copper bottom, really, to be, insured against that, because they experienced that last season where they lost a number of key players through injury, and it derailed things for them. And it almost feels like this summer they've said, we're going to build a squad that effectively insures us against every outcome. If we lose Gabriel, we've got a guy like Nketiah to come in, who's a league title winner from Germany and, international, captained his country, serious top-level player to come in. Odegaard's out. Well, we've signed Eberechi Eze from Crystal Palace and scores a hat-trick for us in the derby. Even at centre-forward, I mean, listen, they wouldn't have expected necessarily to be without both Kai Havertz and Victor Gyökeres, but you've got to take your hat off to Mikel Merino, who, in difficult circumstances, has really found a way to make it work for him as a kind of centre-forward, false nine figure. So Arsenal, the depth Arsenal have is a massive difference between the two squads.
Well, we've touched on it, James, but Eberechi Eze became the first Arsenal men's player in almost 50 years to score a hat-trick against Spurs. I mean, You've spoken about it before in a piece. You revealed that there was a phone call he made to Mikel Arteta before he finally signed. This is a fairy tale story. This is the story the football loves. I mean, how important is it that that signing was made? And we are seeing it pay dividends right now in big games. Look at the Crystal Palace game and obviously a hat-trick in a North London derby.
Yeah, and I think what Arsenal did on the Eze deal kind of shows the degree to which they shifted their strategic approach in the summer, because that was a player who they were looking at, they liked, they were thinking maybe at the right price, he could be a good option for them. In their mind, I think that price was topping out around £50 million, something like that, for a 27-year-old like Eze. Then Kai Havertz gets injured, and suddenly Arsenal's priorities shift, and they end up paying a fee that could total, I think, £67.5 million, essentially getting into a bidding war with Spurs, which they end up coming out on top in, probably because of the player's preference. But Arsenal in the past, I don't think you could ever envisage going above and beyond their valuation like that. But they fell in love with the player. They believed he could deliver magic moments. He gave 3 to the Arsenal fans yesterday. And I do think there was just this sense of the summer where Arsenal just didn't want to leave anything to chance. And having lost Havertz, they felt they needed someone who could give them something extra in attack. And it was a big day for Eze because, look, I think he was obviously superb, but in his first few months at the club, there have been some discussions about his impact. You know, is he being played in the right position? Is he settling in the system? Are Arsenal getting the best out of him? Has he got enough freedom? All these questions. But yeah, not too many questions this morning. So hopefully this can be a big platform for him to kick on and do even more for Arsenal in the coming months.
Yeah, the big conversation, Adam, is can a player step up to the plate? You know, we knew what he'd offered at Crystal Palace. We've seen the growth from his times at Queen's Park Rangers, but you feel it's a player that wanted more. Obviously, a player that didn't want to go to Tottenham but wanted to go to Arsenal. Are you surprised by how well he's doing at Arsenal?
No, not really. He's really good. He was really good at Palace. You know, he's one of those that in the summer when you saw Arsenal linked with him, you just thought, yeah, that makes sense. That makes loads and loads of sense. Both for Eze, you know, he's also really good. You know, Arsenal have started signing players at a really good age, like win now players. You know, and I also like that they don't. Yeah, I think like one of the mistakes that like Man United have made a lot over the last few years is like buying players coming from other big clubs. You know, taking a player who's, you know, I don't know, someone like you buy Ugarte from PSG, someone who's not really done it at a big club, but you kind of think there's a name there and a player there because they've been at a big club, and you sign them. And Arsenal are very good at signing players who still are kind of on that journey towards the top. And I think they've done that pretty consistently. You know, even like a Declan Rice, you know, okay, he'd won a Conference League, but he was going to achieve the best things in his career when he's at Arsenal. And, you know, Zubimendi, similar kind of thing. You know, lots of these, you know, David Raya, Ben White, all of these signings really have been players who are going to go on a journey together towards silverware. Now, there is a counter argument, which is, you know, you could go and sign, I don't know, a Donnarumma, right, who's won it all. He walks into the team, he brings personality, character. But I just don't think that's what Arsenal have been trying to do. And I think it's also better for the spirit, the morale, character of a group where you've not got these players who like think they're doing you a favour in some way by being there. They're doing that. They're going there because they want to win things together. And I think Eze was another one. You know, 27, 28, go in, go and achieve everything you want to achieve. I think it also suits it. I think, you know, profile wise, it gives him a better chance from an England perspective. I mean, who knows who will start as the number 10 for England now. I mean, like the options are absolutely amazing. And every week, you know, just this weekend, you know, you've had Eze score a hat-trick, you've had Bellingham score for Real Madrid, Morgan Rogers score 2. That's without Cole Palmer and Foden really doing much this weekend. You know, it is incredible. And then you still got, you know, Saki, still think will probably start. So the options from that perspective, but Eze is, you know, technically an unbelievable player. And also really, I mean, I can't. I was listening to someone yesterday say like the last 15 minutes, it was like watching a Brazilian player play for Arsenal, just like the level to which he was enjoying himself and the freedom that he had on the field, having scored a couple of goals. looks to have all the time in the world. And he can do lots of different, he can do lots of different things. He can play off the left. I don't think that suits Arsenal. I don't know what you think, James. I think he is probably at his best as the 10. I don't know. Who do you play when Odegaard's fit?
I think on the left at the moment, it's hard to look past Leandro Trossard the way he's playing. I mean, he's in superb form. And he's got a great partnership with Ricardo Calafiori. Calafiori started every Premier League game this season at left back. Has been terrific. And I think there's a really good relationship there with Trossard, who is having, maybe the season of his life. I mean, he's another guy who's at an age, I think he's 30 now, 31 in a few weeks' time, where this is the time for him. This is his moment. It was interesting. Arsenal, they gave him a contract adjustment in the summer. They raised his salary, but they didn't extend his deal. I think he knows, the club knows, it's kind of now or never, and he is delivering on that. So I think it'll be hard to displace him. I think, after what Eze produced against Spurs, he'll feel like the shirt is his. And that's interesting because you have got the club captain, Martin Odegaard, coming back. Arteta has started them together. He started them with, I think, Eze on the left, and he started them as 2-8s in one of the home games with Declan Rice in behind, but it was interrupted by an injury to Martin Odegaard about 20 minutes into that experiment. So it remains to be seen if we see that again.
Do you think it helps this squad that actually that strengthening depth, as we're talking about Eze and Odegaard, means that actually not anyone is guaranteed to start in that respect? There is competition in the squad in a way that I probably would say we haven't seen for about, I'd say, the last 2 or 3 seasons at Arsenal.
Yeah, I mean, I think... Arsenal fans aren't shy of letting people know when they've had injuries or problems in their squad. And what's interesting is that that's just not been a key narrative in Arsenal's season. They have had a number of big players absent. And to be honest, they've maintained momentum despite that. Gabriel is out now. Saliba's been out. Odegaard's been out. Saka's been out. Martinelli's been out. Gyökeres, Havertz has missed basically the whole season so far. You wouldn't know it, really. And I think that it is testament to the work that they've done building this squad. They don't just have an 11. If you think back to Arsenal's sort of title charge of 2022-23, for example, you could name the Arsenal 11, and beyond that, they weren't looking too strong. Whereas this is a group with the capacity to make 3 or 4 changes and still look every bit as strong. And it has come at significant expense. There's been a massive financial commitment to make that happen. But you do get the sense that for this season, at least, these players are happy to be on the boat, right? They're happy to play their part. It's meant less minutes for some. The likes of Ethan Ranieri and Miles Lewis-Skelly haven't had as many opportunities maybe as they did in the second half of last season. And I think that's just because the emphasis is on a team, a group that are in prime age and ready to win right now.
James, do you think, given how strong Arsenal's position is in the Champions League, I know obviously Bayern is on paper, big game, but you've got two of Arsenal's hardest games of the Premier League season over the next, 2 weeks, 10 days, Chelsea away, Villa away. Does he rest players against Bayern?
It could be an opportunity to rest Eze, for example. Played, the majority of the game, and maybe the whole game, in fact. That could be one, and give Odegaard some minutes if he's available. I think Trossard maybe is one who could get a rest. I think at fullbacks, you can make changes. They've got Lewis-Skelly, as I mentioned, who can come in at left back. Ben White, who we haven't seen very much of at all recently, could come in for Jurriën Timber. I think there are changes that he could make without destabilising the team. And given Arsenal's strong position in the group stage of the Champions League, like you say, I think they can afford it. And I think that Chelsea game is so big. I mean, almost the prize of if they went to Chelsea and won there, they would just be in such a strong position. I'd like to see him take a few out for the Bayern game, yeah.
I'm just thinking about the difference, though, in terms of Arsenal and, let's say, Liverpool, Adam, in terms of the recruitment, and we touched on it not long ago. What do you think the difference is in Liverpool's recruitment, that they seem to be struggling, and for some reason Arsenal seem to be better with their recruitment because they've both spent a lot of money?
Yeah, it's weird to have a conversation about Liverpool not having good recruitment because it's something we've praised them for a very long time. but clearly just this summer hasn't worked yet. But we're taking a 10 to 12 game sample size. What their biggest signing, Isak. I think clearly that saga kind of disorientated their whole preseason and their whole preparation. Not only theirs, Newcastle's as well. Clearly the player's own as well. He clearly had his head on turned towards a move from probably February, March onwards last season. He's not really played well since. So that's an issue. I think it's hard because I think probably 2 months ago, everyone was like, Liverpool have had the best transfer window ever. Right? You were looking at the players they'd signed, players from Bayer Leverkusen, who had been kind of one of the outstanding teams in Europe over the last couple of years, in Frimpong and Wirtz and Kerkez, who was probably one of the best left backs in the division last season. Ekitike, who's, I think he's been pretty good, although hasn't really done much for the last few weeks. And Isak, who probably second to Haaland in terms of number 9s in the world. So it's hard on paper to be like, well, Liverpool have got this wrong. But you watch the team and they've clearly got it wrong so far. And it's, I would say kind of the things that I'm trying not to say things which like completely undermine other things that I've said on this podcast in previous weeks, which is always difficult for me. But again, if we go back to like probably what I said after the Community Shield, which was one, I think some people in that kind of haste to like emotionally move on from Trent Alexander-Arnold kind of went from he's one of the best players in the world to, well, he wasn't a very good defender, was he? When actually, I think what he brought to Liverpool was just completely unique and quite irreplaceable in many ways without really changing the structure of the team. And I think that seemed to have been underpriced. And I also think, I thought Wirtz at the time, I said it then, still think, I think he's a Man City player of a few years ago, in terms of like the time he takes on the ball and the kind of style that he has. And then I just don't really understand why you need both Ekitike and Isak for one position when they needed something probably from the left to replace Diaz, obviously Jota as well. And then also I felt they needed something else in as a kind of holding midfielder, because I'm worried whether Gravenberch could do another season of the level that he showed last season. And now you start to look at them and you're like, they've spent 450 million, and you almost look at it like they need to spend the same to fix it, because you start to think like Salah kind of looks not past it, but like past his best. And who's going to play from that position? That's going to cost a lot of money. Then you're like, Konate's fallen off a cliff and looks like he might leave. So they need a world-class centre-back. Maybe Van Dijk, over the next couple of years needs replacing. And obviously, and Alisson's having injuries. They've got a goalkeeper they brought in, Mamardashvili, who looks okay, but not fantastic. So you start to look at them and kind of worry about them from being in a place in the summer where, some people were like, they won't even need to buy a player next summer. It's a really weird kind of way that the conversation has moved on.
Yeah, James, Arsenal are 6 points clear after 12 games. And some might say, they can drop a few points in the Premier League against Chelsea, for instance. They've still got Bayern to come in the Champions League on Wednesday. Do you think Arsenal fans are ready to be the team to beat? Because this fan base can be a bit fragile from time to time.
No, and I'm interested in that. And I understand it fully because there is a bit of trauma there. Arsenal have been usurped in the past when it looked like it might be their year in the very recent past too. But I do think there'll be an interesting point in this season where Arteta's language, for example, changes. I do think there will be kind of a step Arsenal take where they go from one game at a time, we could win the league, to we are going to do this, that it becomes that kind of positivity in their messaging to the players, to the fans. And I wonder when fans will come around to that idea as well, because I think, I put my journalist hat on and I sit here with you guys, and I think this group absolutely could win it. I think from the position they're in, they probably should win it. And I think they will. That's my objective opinion on it. But there is still a support part of me that, holds me back. It's the fear of being clipped up, isn't it, by Manchester City fans in May. But I really think they have all the tools.
Have you seen their running, by the way? It's an absolute gimme.
Yeah, well,
seriously.
I mean, but this is the problem, Adam.
No,
some fans will look at that and think, no. If
they've got the Etihad relatively late.
Think about Sunderland. That was a chink yet again, and people are going, oh, are the wheels falling off?
Right, their last 10 games: Brighton, Everton, Wolves, Bournemouth, City, Newcastle at home, Fulham, West Ham, Burnley, Palace. I mean, we will know by the end of February, I think, because you'll have played by then Liverpool twice, Manchester United twice, Chelsea twice. You know, I'm not obviously there's no games that are gimmies, but I really do think, like, Arsenal, I think the most important period of this season is going to be this period up until the next international break for Arsenal. I think that's the period that will define if Arsenal are able to get over the line, because I think also, now I'm getting really carried away, because of some of those fixtures actually towards the end, it also gives Arsenal a real chance in the Champions League. You know, if you had in those final 7, 8, 9 games, 5 or 6 of the big teams to play, that really changes the week to week in April and May. So look, it's hard to get past the quadruple at the moment. Oh, that's a joke, by the way.
Oh no, I got it.
I wasn't going to contradict you, but I think I do just get the sense that this group is much more mature at this stage. There is a kind of calmness about them. You see that in their disciplinary record, for example. Like they are very, very calm at the moment, and there is a sort of serenity about this group, and that I think gives them a fantastic chance. They're mature.
There also hasn't been, remember last season, and look, some of the decisions weren't great, but it felt like every week, like Arsenal were moaning about something, that there was some kind of hysteria about something, that there was some grievance, and clearly some of those were real. But this season there just isn't, and that's because they're not also making some of the mistakes that they made last season, and some of the lapses, the emotional lapses. They're not giving the referees a chance. They're not putting the games in the balance.
No, and Arteta said that, I think it was after their third sending off last season. He basically came out and said, we just cannot continue to sustain this. Whether that we feel the decisions are right or wrong, it has to end, it has to change. And they find themselves top of the fair play table right now, which is a hell of a turnaround from a team that had 6 red cards last season. And they have had setbacks too. I mentioned the injuries, but they were beaten by Liverpool at Anfield. They dropped the points at Sunderland. That doesn't seem to have disturbed them. I think in previous seasons we've seen Arsenal go on little bad runs where one defeat might beget another. They stabilise very, very, very quickly.
Okay, Adam, let's wrap it up. Time for final whistle. 60 seconds to tell us what's on your mind from the world of football this week. 3, 2, 1. Off you go, son.
I actually didn't have one, but I just saw that Rangers have let go of Rangers, who are majority owned by the guys who own the 49ers in the NFL, who also own Leeds, and it just got me thinking about, I think sometimes these NFL owners come into soccer in Europe and find real challenges, and I think that's what you're seeing now with both Rangers and Leeds. There was the Russell Martin episode at Rangers. Now they've just got rid of the CEO, Patrick Stewart, sporting director, Kevin Thelwell, and I really wouldn't be surprised if there was a change at Leeds over the next few weeks as well. They've got a really tough run coming up, and they had a really, I think, deficient transfer window from an attacking perspective. So I think big challenges ahead for the men who own the 49ers.
Okay, nice. We'll leave it there. 54 seconds, not bad at all. Appreciate your time, Adam, James, and also thank you for joining us as well. Don't forget to leave us a comment and like and share the video as well. We'll see you soon. For more from the Athletic FC podcast, make sure you like and subscribe to the channel. We've got top journalists like David Ornstein, Matt Slater, Adam Crafton, Carl Anker, and plenty more through the entire season. Make sure you don't miss an episode of the Athletic FC. You can get it wherever you get your podcasts from.